Hey everyone! Quick question, what exactly is it that makes a region in a Pokemon game good or bad? Well, we're going to talk about it today because I'm going to be doing my very first region review of Kanto. I'm Sabrina and you're watching Saffron City TV. Welcome back everyone. This video marks the very first of a long series of region reviews that I am going to be doing. And like I said, today we are going to be starting it off with Kanto. Why not? It's the very first Pokemon region ever created, right? I'm going to be delving deeply into this region, exploring all of the factors that contribute to its quality, and I'll be providing my own very personal review. I personally think that regions are such an integral part of these games. I mean, it's literally the world that we exist and operate within inside of the games. And most of the time, they're also based on real-world places. Therefore, I really do think that they're worth talking about, they're worth mentioning, they're worth deep diving into, and they're worth at least just like a modicum of appreciation. You know what I mean? It's pretty obvious to me that Game Freak puts a lot of thought, effort, love, and care into the creation of these regions, and I just don't really see them getting a whole lot of attention out there, so I'm here to fill in the gap as I'll be covering more Pokemon regions in the future. And to start, today I will be doing my Kanto region review. So, what is a region review exactly? Let's talk about it. Well, every single region is special and unique, and every game has brought new life to the series by introducing a new place to explore and enjoy. However, not all regions are created equally. Some are better than others objectively. But what makes a region good or bad? Well, a lot of that is subjective, but there are aspects of some regions that are just objectively better or worse than others. Is the game linear and handholdy throughout the region? Or does it allow the player to freely explore the area to their heart's content? Does the region have a variety of different biomes to experience where unique Pokemon can be found exclusively in that area? Or are most of the routes really samey without a ton of differences and repeat Pokemon? What about lore? Did the townsfolk talk about a mysterious legendary Pokemon that used to live nearby? Or does everyone just redundantly explain to you how to use a potion or the fact that Pokeballs are important? Well, I've got a list of criteria that delineates exactly what makes a region good or bad, and a scoring system to go along with it. The categories of aspects of the regions that I will be judging will be region design, town and city design and aesthetic, route and cave design and aesthetic, traversability and transportation, exploratory incentives, culture, lore, and immersion, Pokemon diversity, gym leaders, Elite Four and trainer classes, naturally occurring phenomena, and music and ambiance. Each of these categories will get a score between 1 and 5, 1 being terrible, 5 being perfect, you know how it goes. At the end, I'll add up the scores and divide by the number of categories, that being 10, to determine its final review score. The highest final score a region can receive is 5, and the lowest is a 1. And I'd also suggest that you stay tuned until the very end, as I may determine that a region's design isn't all that great, but the culture, lore, and immersion might be amazing. And there's a lot that's going to be packed into these videos. When I say I'm going to do a deep dive, I'm going to be doing a deep dive. So buckle up, Buttercup, because it's going to be a long one. Make sure you got a snack and a drink. Plus, I'll be covering every iteration of the region from their first appearance to their remakes. I likely won't go into depth on all of the differences between the games, but you'll definitely see some of it mentioned in this video. It is also important to note that I will not be using the anime as reference material for my videos. It is often very inaccurate, and I kind of want to prefer to stick with the objective information that I find from the video games themselves. And before I get into this review, I think it's important to remember that no matter what I say in this video, you are permitted and entitled to love or hate a region for whatever reason you deem necessary, and don't let this review sway your opinions too much. I'm going to do my best to be as objective as possible, but I'm only human, so there may be some subjectivity involved. But we'll get there when the time comes. For now, I simply hope that you enjoy this video. So, let's get into the review. Kanto. Ah, Kanto. I can taste the nostalgia now. Everyone who played through Kanto as a kid remembers the first time they stepped into the Viridian Forest or visited Celadon City and played the slots at the game corner. Kanto in the Pokemon games is based on the real-world region of Kanto in Japan and is the only region to share the name of its real-world counterpart. Kanto is the very first Pokemon region ever created, and as such, this region was likely a bit of a guinea pig for Game Freak. However, this region has been the subject of remakes twice now, and I think it's important not to give it any free passes in this review just because it's Game Freak's eldest child. Kanto gets the same treatment as all of its predecessors, and if they ever want to change it or improve the region design, they've had a few opportunities to do so, and really haven't with the release of the Let's Go games, as the majority of Kanto is essentially the same as it was back in the Gen 1 days. So let's start off this review with its most basic elements. Region design. Kanto's theme is modern and technological, with many large cities and suburban routes throughout. Kanto is located east of Johto and south of Sinnoh, surrounded by ocean on its eastern and southern sides. Kanto is shaped much like a square with a few offshoots, and most of its routes are linear and rectangular. Kanto also has a temperate climate and therefore doesn't have much biome diversity. This could be due to the technological restrictions at the time of the game's initial release in 1996. Kanto is really mostly grasslands, trees, and rivers, with a few urbanized routes like Route 17, a bike route, and Route 24 with the Nugget Bridge, as Kanto is supposed to be more modern and technological compared to its Johto neighbor. There are a few mountain ranges, the most notable of which surround Pewter City and contain the Indigo Plateau and Victory Road, which separates Kanto from Johto. However, the two are simultaneously connected via this area, as Kanto shares its Pokemon League with Johto. Another mountain range lies north of Celadon and Route 16, and the final cluster of smaller mountains lie northeast of Saffron City and west of the power plant. Kanto has an ocean peninsula west of Vermilion City that runs underneath Route 17. There is also Cinnabar Island, which is considered to be a town and/or volcano south of the water routes below Pallet Town, and the Seafoam Islands east of Cinnabar. I debated on whether or not the Sevi Islands, accessible in FireRed and LeafGreen, are considered to be part of Kanto. However, I don't believe they are, as they're not visible on the map of Kanto, nor can you fly to them, and therefore I've determined that the Sevi Islands do not count as part of the Kanto region itself. Most of Kanto's major cities are located at the center of the region surrounding Saffron City. The routes between these cities are separated by guarded gateway buildings that lie on all four sides of Saffron City. The Safari Zone in Fuchsia City encompasses a savanna, which adds a small amount of spice to this region's biomes, and there are quite a few caves in this region, being the Cerulean Cave, Diglett's Cave, Mount Moon, Rock Tunnel, the Seafoam Islands, and Victory Road. In Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and HeartGold and SoulSilver, the Cinnabar Gym also exists inside of a cave. The standout amongst them would be the caves found on the Seafoam Islands. These caves are actually icy inside, with some flowing canals and frozen patches, which gives a little flair to the biome diversity of the region as well. All in all, Kanto is a bit simple, but once again, this is the first region ever made, so that aspect is pretty understandable. For region design, I'd have to give Kanto a score of 2. There's really not anything to write home about here. The cities being so central and close together and small towns being on the outskirts of the region kinda makes sense from a real-world perspective, but it's all laid out in one big spiraling square. The theme is kind of interesting, and I definitely get the modern and technological vibe, what with all the large cities and power plant, the bike route, and other suburbanized areas like the Nugget Bridge, but is Kanto really more modern than any other region? I mean, maybe in some aspects, sure. There is very little biome diversity, being mostly grasslands and dirt paths with only one forest, being the Viridian Forest, one savanna in the Safari Zone, 2 islands in Cinnabar Island and the Seafoam Islands, and tons of caves. I'm pretty sure you spend about a third of this game in the caves alone. But to give credit where credit is due, the Seafoam Islands and savanna in the Safari Zone does deliver a small amount of biome diversity to this region, and it definitely helps. The fact that Kanto is directly connected to Johto is a pretty cool aspect, and I love that in Gens 2 and 4, you basically get to explore both regions. The simple layout of Kanto works in its favor, but also works against it. While Kanto is very memorable, with a lot of nostalgia attached, even after being remade with modern graphics and technology, it still feels very basic. So let's move on to the next category. Town and city design and aesthetic. Kanto has some of the most memorable cities and towns of all the regions. Pallet Town, Viridian City, Pewter City, Cerulean City, Vermilion City, Lavender Town, Celadon, Fuchsia, and Saffron City. Hey, what's good? And finally, Cinnabar Island. Each town and city feels unique and is named after a color. Additionally, these colors are incorporated into the design of the location. Lavender Town has homes with lavender-colored roofs, Saffron City's buildings were built with saffron yellow brick, and Pewter City's roads and walkways are paved in pewter stone. All of the towns and cities have something remarkable about them. First, let's talk about Pallet Town. It's small, quaint, and newly built, and its name refers to a palette of colors, referring to the names of all of the subsequent towns and cities in the region. Pallet is the hometown of the player and is described in the games as a fairly new and quiet town. It's a small and pretty place. This is also where Professor Oak's laboratory is located. But if we travel a bit north, you'll find Viridian City, described in the games as a beautiful city that is enveloped in green year-round, and this is evident as the town is surrounded by trees and greenery on all sides. The gym here is owned and operated by a maniacal mob boss. Ingenious plan if you ask me, because I wouldn't have guessed. Viridian City also houses the Trainer Academy next to the Pokemart. However, in Generations 2 and 4, the Academy has been replaced by the Trainer House, where you can partake in trainer battles once a day. Heading even further north, Pewter City is described in the games as a quiet city nestled between rugged mountains and rocks. Here you can visit the Pewter Museum of Science, which showcases many scientific artifacts like fossils, space shuttles, and a moonstone that fell from space and landed on Mount Moon to the east of the city. You can also get an old amber from a scientist via a secret entrance to the back of the museum. In Gen 4, you can actually get your fossils revived at this museum. Plus, there's a notice in town regarding thieves that have been stealing fossils from Mount Moon and urges you to contact the Pewter Police with any information. After Pewter, we're going to make our way east until we reach our next destination, Cerulean City, which is described in the games as a beautiful city with flowing water and blooming flowers. This city is located in northern Kanto and is encompassed by a river on the western side of town where the entrance to the Cerulean Cave is accessible, and there's an ocean inlet to the north of town. There is a bike shop here that is really freaking proud of their bikes because they sell them for 1 million buckaroonies. What are these? Lamborghini bicycles? Madness. Absolute madness. However, they'll give you one for free in exchange for a bike voucher. I bet they'll also teach a class called Bad Business 101 on the weekends. The gym badge guy and the berry powder guy also live here, plus one of the homes north of the gym has been straight up burglarized and ransacked by Team Rocket. Damn, there's crime here too. From here, we'll head southwest until we get to Vermilion City, which is described in the games as a southern city that is bathed in orange by the setting sun. This city is a popular seaport near an inlet to the south, where ships like the SS Anne, the SS Aqua, and the Sea Gallop ferries regularly dock and set sail from the Vermilion Harbor. The SS Anne sails around the entire world and arrives back to Vermilion City only once a year. It's too bad that it refuses to depart until you've exited the ship, because that could have been a really cool experience. Plus, there's an ancient schoolyard rumor that the truck next to the docks at the harbor has a Mew underneath it. And just so y'all know, it was all lies. Vermilion seems to always be under construction, as there's a virtually permanent construction site to the northeast side of town, and there's a Pokemon fan club here. And if you listen to the chairman talk forever about his Rapidash, he'll eventually give you the bike voucher you need to actually obtain a bike in Cerulean City. Freaking scammers. Okay, now we're gonna head east again to Lavender Town, which is described in the games as a small town covered in a beautiful hue of purple. The most notable structure in this town is the Pokemon Tower, which acts as a massive 7-floor Pokemon grave site with hundreds of graves on each floor. It's spooky. And of course, this building is occupied by Team Rocket on the top floor. If you think that's sad, wait till you hear that in Gens 2 and 4, this historical grave site has been converted into a freaking radio tower. This is crazy to me. You can't just desecrate a mourning place for Pokemon like that. What the fuck? The graves were actually moved to the House of Memories that exist where the Pokemart used to be in Gens 2 and 4, or they've been moved underground. Kinda sad, but what can you do? If it were my Eradicate, I'd be pissed. Moving on, in the center of town is the Lavender Volunteer Pokemon House, which was founded by Mr. Fuji in order to care for abandoned and orphaned Pokemon. I'm not crying, you're crying. There's also a sign in town that advertises the Pokeflute. Next up, we're gonna head west to Celadon City, and boy is there a bunch to do here. The city is described in the games as a rich, rainbow-colored city where people and Pokemon gather. The entire city is packed with condominiums and apartment buildings, including the Game Freak building, and so on. The largest structure of note is the massive Celadon department store, where you could buy anything your little heart desires. There's also a hotel, a restaurant, and in Gen 9 there's even a fortune teller here. But the most interesting aspect of this city is the Celadon Game Corner. That's right, baby. We in Vegas now. You can grind on the slots in hopes that you hit the big old jackpot. Maybe even develop a gambling addiction at the age of 7. Who knows? You can also exchange coins for different Pokemon based on the version of the game you're playing. But the oddest thing about this casino is the fact that the Team Rocket hideout is hidden underneath. That's right, the headquarters of the largest criminal organization in the region is right here beneath Celadon City. Absolute madness. After that, we're going to travel down south to Fuchsia City, which is described in the games as a historic village that has become new. Fuchsia is pretty interesting, as the entire northernmost part of the city acts as a giant Pokemon zoo where you can see Pokemon like Lapras, Kangaskhan, and Chansey walking around in their pens. But just north of the zoo is the Safari Zone, a large enclosed savanna where you can pay a fee to catch environmentally protected Pokemon, some of which aren't available anywhere else in the region. This area has been changed to Pal Park in Gens 2 and 4 and Go Park in Gen 9. Next, we're going to head to the center of the region to Saffron City, described in the games as the biggest city in Kanto, shining with a golden light. This is also the city that my channel is named after. Why? Because the gym leader's name is Sabrina and my name is Sabrina, and both of our favorite Pokemon are psychic types, and it was a well thought out thing. Anyway, this metropolis is the largest in the region, modeled after Tokyo, Japan. Saffron City is a giant business hub with the glorious and massive 11-floor Silphco skyscraper situated at the heart of the city. According to Bulbapedia, it's essentially the leading manufacturer of Pokemon technology in the world, producing goods such as the Pokeball and the Silphscope. And guess what? There's crime here too, as Silphco is also occupied by none other than Team Rocket upon your initial visit. They really got their hands up in everyone's cookie jar, don't they? Surrounding Silphco are other high-rise buildings, apartments, and business complexes indicative of Saffron's large population. In the northern part of the city, you'll notice that there are 2 gyms here, an official Pokemon League gym and the Fighting Dojo, where you can obtain either a Hitmonchan or a Hitmonlee. There are also a few other places of note nestled in the city, such as the Magnet Train Station, Mr. Psychic's house, the Copycat's house, and the Pokemon Trainer Fan Club. After we're done exploring Saffron City, we are going to surf to the southwesternmost island of the region, to Cinnabar Island, described in the games as the ravaged town of the past. Depending on the version of the game you're playing, this town is either situated on a tiny island or is a massive volcano that erupted and destroyed the place. But it does have a little hot spring. Before Cinnabar became the victim of a volcanic eruption, there was an abandoned mansion here, and inside you could find little journals scattered about the place that reveal that the Pokemon Mewtwo was created by scientists at the Cinnabar lab just south of the mansion. If you visit the Cinnabar lab, you can have your fossils in Old Amber restored into their respective Pokemon. In Gens 2 and 4, it's just a volcano with a Pokemon Center next to it. Even the gym no longer exists, and Blaine now runs his gym leader duties out of the Seafoam Islands to the east. And finally, we're going to head north to the Indigo Plateau, situated within a mountain range where trainers who have collected all 8 gym badges can take on the Elite Four and the champion of the region. With all of that being said, for town and city design and aesthetic, I'd have to give Kanto a whopping score of 5. There is a clear concept here. Big city living with tons of technology and bustling business. Whether or not Kanto is more modern than other regions is debatable, though I truly believe that the developers achieved the themes they were aiming for here. While not every city feels large and robust, like Pewter, Cerulean, and Vermilion City, there are still aspects of these places that lead me to believe that they are just simply small cities and not rural towns due to their inclusion of things like a giant museum, a bustling harbor, and a luxury bike shop. Essentially, every single town or city has something to explore and check out, with important landmarks and things to see and do. Even a tiny town like Lavender has the spooky but significant Pokemon Tower to traverse, and the technological vibe that developers envisioned is certainly evident with the inclusion of a few different science laboratories and large-scale businesses scattered throughout. I mean, not only that, but the colorful aesthetic of these cities and towns is very pleasing to the eye and feels consistent throughout the entire game. You know you're in Vermilion due to the color palette of the city. Hell, you might have only learned that that particular shade of orange is called Vermilion because of the city. And though Kanto doesn't get any bonus points in the region design department for being the first region ever created, it does get some points for being incredibly iconic as far as towns and cities are concerned. Not to mention that with the release of the Let's Go games, we've got updated textures, a new and unique artful take on the region, and better aesthetic design and graphics. And now Kanto looks more modern and appealing as well. With tons to explore, recognizable and memorable landmarks, and a clear concept and theme ever present in their designs, I really think Kanto deserves a perfect 5 for its cities and towns' design and aesthetics. Pardon the interruption to your regularly scheduled programming. However, I'd like to take a minute to say thank you to our sponsor for today, me. That's right, I am sponsoring this video with my blood, sweat, and tears. And if my tears are particularly tasty to you, why don't you consider liking the video? All jokes aside, I'm really trying to get monetized before the end of the year. So that way when I put a week's worth of full-time hours into a video, I at least get, a little monetary compensation. I'm literally less than 300 subscribers away from reaching my goal of 1,000. And your subscription really helps me to achieve that goal. Plus, if you're actually enjoying the video, why not leave a like? It's free for you and it makes a world of difference to me. And if you want to see more content like what you've gotten so far, why not subscribe? Thank you so much for all of your support. I really appreciate all of you. Now, back to the review. We are going to pick up where we left off with the next category. Route and cave design and aesthetic. Okay, so I'm not going to be deep diving into every single route in Kanto, that would be ridiculous, but I will be talking about them generally, and a few will be mentioned specifically. All of the routes in Kanto are listed in numeric order, starting from Route 1 and ending with routes 26, 27, and 28, which connect Kanto to Johto. The routes in Kanto are predominantly just grasslands with a few paths and some small hills, and maybe one or two mountainous areas with very little to do in them, other than just get from point A to point B. Yeah, there's not a ton of flowers to stop and sniff along the way. For the majority of the game, these routes seem very similar to one another, and few of them stand out from the crowd. I'm thinking of routes like 1, 3, 4, 9, 11, that wasn't intentional, 15, and 18. There's nothing to do in these routes but catch Pokemon battle trainers and get to the next area without much visual flair or interesting activities. Routes like 19 and 21 are structured similarly to the ones mentioned previously, except they're ocean routes with some rocks, trainers, and non-stop Pokemon encounters. The exception to this would be Route 20, which contains the Seafoam Islands that you must traverse in order to reach Cinnabar Island from Fuchsia City, and I'll talk about the Seafoam Islands shortly. Route 2 is somewhat interesting, as not only does it connect Viridian City to Pewter City, but it also contains Diglett's Cave, which will connect you back to Vermilion City. There's also a little house on this route where you can find an in-game trade, and a building to the south with one of Professor Oak's aides inside to provide you with the HM for Flash. Route 5 is only interesting because the daycare is situated here at the base of a hill and an underground path entrance which connects to Route 6. But then routes 6, 7, and 8 are basically the same as the others, just some grass with some paths and maybe a little water. Except they do contain gateway buildings and the entrances to the underground paths, which allow you to bypass the roadblocks evident in the beginning of the game. Route 8 has some fenced-in flowers and tall grass, but other than that, there's nothing notable here. Route 10, on the other hand, is somewhat cool due to the power plant being situated south of the entrance to Rock Tunnel, accessible with the ability to surf, and one of the other more notable routes is Route 12, which is mostly comprised of docks and piers known as the Silent Bridge on the easternmost ocean south of Lavender Town, and I think this route is really unique and interesting. Routes 13 and 14 are pretty plain with the same old grass, paths, and water, except there's also a fence maze for some reason. Route 16 contains some gateway buildings, one of which leads you to a house where you can obtain the HM for Fly, and the other leads you to the bike path and Route 17. Route 17 is pretty nifty though, as you can only traverse this route on bike, and it appears fairly urbanized with streetlights, paved roads, and it lies over the top of the westernmost ocean. You can even see the ocean between the roads, and I really like that artistic touch. Route 22 is to the west of Viridian City and connects you to Route 23, which contains the entrance to the Indigo Plateau. It's also nice as you can encounter a small variety of Pokemon at the beginning of the game. Speaking of Route 23, it's one of the few routes with some flair as it's nestled within a mountain range. There's some same old grass paths and water here, but the paths are paved in stone. There's a stone maze in the northern part of this route. It contains Victory Road, and as mentioned previously, the entrance to the Indigo Plateau. Route 24 contains the memorable Nugget Bridge, and on Route 25 you can find the Pokemon researcher Bill's Sea Cottage, and he's got a little laboratory going on there doing some crazy experiments on himself and such. Routes 26, 27, and 28 are all inaccessible unless you're playing Gens 2 and 4, as that's basically how you get to the Indigo Plateau from Johto. But they too are similarly primarily comprised of grassland pathways with a little bit of water in them. Okay, that's it for the routes. Now let's talk about the caves. Boy, does Kanto love its freaking caves. To reiterate, there are 6 different caves in this region, being the Cerulean Cave, Diglett's Cave, Mountain Moon, Rock Tunnel, the Seafoam Islands, and Victory Road. That's a lot of caves. Most of these caves are pretty expansive, with Diglett's Cave being the exception, and they're about as exciting as caves can really be, I guess. There generally isn't much to do in caves except encounter countless Pokemon, battle trainers, and get from point A to point B, just like the routes. And this is pretty much the case for all regions, with a few exceptions. Mountain Moon is pretty cool, as there are giant craters in the floor of the cave, which kind of makes it look like the surface of the moon, with some sandy patches around the edges. Plus, in Gens 2 and 4, you can access Mountain Moon Square, which contains a tiny shop and a square field where Clefairy are said to perform secret rituals. Rock Tunnel is pretty boring other than the fact that it's got some stalagmites and stalactites and pools of water around the edges. There's some muddy spots in it, I guess. It's pretty dark in there, and unless you're a pro, you might need the ability to use Flash, and in some games that could mean using up a move slot on a Pokemon, or just straight up replacing an entire team member until you've cleared the cave. Diglett's cave also isn't that interesting. You have to take a ladder down into the cave and a ladder to exit, and the only important thing about it is that it can connect you back to Route 2 from Vermilion City. However, the Seafoam Islands are pretty nifty as they're icy caves with some ocean canals and even frozen patches with some puzzles included. The Seafoam Islands are the only caves of their kind and give some biome diversity to this region. Victory Road is Victory Road. I don't know what else to say. You gotta go through it to finish the game. Yeah, it's a big cave with some ladders. Whoop-de-doo. There are some HM puzzles here, some strong trainers, and in Gen 9, the place is lit up by little fire thingies. That's about it. And finally, Cerulean Cave is an optional place to visit, but it's probably the coolest cave in the region, as it has water flowing throughout, some bridges, plenty of puzzles, glowing green crystals everywhere, with a pretty significant exploratory incentive that I'll talk about later. Look, listen, Linda. Unless you just really freaking love spelunking, the caves get old really quickly. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm pretty sure you spend a third of this game in caves. 7 out of 10, too much cave, all right? The routes and caves of this region begin to feel pretty redundant after a while. It's fun the first couple of times you visit Kanto, but after a while, everything just seems to blend together until traversing the region is akin to just going through the motions. Unlike its towns and cities, I'm gonna have to give Kanto's route and cave design and aesthetic a stinky little score of 2. Ouchie. I know. I'm sorry. But the routes and caves are just really not that great. There's hardly any flair to the routes. They're pretty samey with very few standouts. The caves are really not anything to jump for joy about either. I mean, Cerulean Cave is pretty cool and Mount Moon is very memorable. But other than that, there's just not much substance here. Plus, the amount of time you spend traversing them makes the mini caves feel all the more redundant. I understand that a remake needs to be faithful to the original game, and while the Let's Go games certainly did that with a fresh coat of paint applied, there still could have been opportunities to add something exciting or just something more to do in these routes to give them just a little more flavor. I guess they achieved that with the coach trainers, but still, it's just another trainer to battle. The new and improved graphics certainly stand out in the beginning, but once the graphical honeymoon phase has worn off, you're reminded that the routes are just as they were back in ye olden days. Adding overworld Pokemon to these areas certainly did help supply a little pizzazz, and that coupled with the updated graphics is why Kanto isn't getting a 1 in the route and cave design and aesthetic category. I understand why the routes and caves were designed the way they were, but the question is there anything memorable, notable, or aesthetically pleasing about them that helps them stand up to today's quality of design, especially when remakes have been made? Unlike the towns and cities, as far as the routes and caves are concerned, the answer here is not really. Okay, moving on to Traversability and Transportation. Traversability in this context refers to the ease and enjoyment the player experiences while navigating through the region. Meanwhile, transportation serves as the evident method employed for achieving this traversal and the ability to visit otherwise inaccessible areas. Many games put roadblocks in place to help maintain a linear storyline, making much of the traversability of a region fairly linear as a result. And although this isn't always the case, it's certainly evident in the earlier Pokemon titles with the necessity for HMs. And while HMs are the most inefficient way to traverse the regions because they require a Pokemon that can learn them and the use of one of their move slots, the implementation of these mechanics themselves are not necessarily a bad thing. Every mainline Pokemon to date has incorporated some version of HM, ride Pokemon, or a device that grants players the ability to surf, fly, and scale cliffs, amongst other things, to aid your progression through the region. Additionally, these features are given to the player at various points within the game to uphold the continuity of the storyline's progression. And this has been the case from the very beginning up until the most recent releases with Scarlet and Violet. Roadblocks aren't necessarily a bad thing as long as they make sense and don't lead to player frustration or navigation fatigue. In Kanto, Gens 1 through 4 require the usage of HMs, and in Gen 9 they've been replaced by secret techniques that your partner Pikachu or Eevee can learn, but they function virtually the same way, only they don't require the use of a move slot. Kanto is full of roadblocks. Some make sense, and some just don't. One of the first major roadblocks to traversing the region is found in the second town you encounter in the game, Viridian City. In the Japanese versions, a drunk man is passed out in the street, and for some reason, we are just too damn polite to step over him or say, excuse me, can we please get this man a Pedialyte and a ride home? They changed it in the American games to a grumpy guy that hasn't had his coffee yet or whatever. Personally, I think the drunk guy is more fun though. This roadblock isn't really a big deal and is cleared up after Oak gets his parcel from the Pokemart. The next roadblock you'll encounter is literally in the same town as the Viridian Gym is locked up until the end of the game. Now, I'm not going to be talking about every single cut tree or roadblock in the region, but I will be going over the major ones like the tiny little tree that prevents you from entering into the Vermilion City Gym. Honestly, this one makes no sense. You can only get the HM for cut and subsequent entry into the gym from the captain of the SS Anne after giving him a back rub. This also makes no sense. Personally, I think he's a little creepy. But the reason this particular roadblock makes no sense is that the SS Anne is not there in every iteration of the games. What would have happened if the SS Anne wasn't there when you needed to get into the gym? What, you just hang around Vermilion for an entire year until it comes back and pray to God that the old man needs another back rub? And why does the tree need to be there to prevent entry to the gym in the first place? There's nothing happening on the SS Anne that would theoretically make sense to prevent you from accessing the gym. What would have been the harm in the devs allowing us to take on the gym before boarding the SS Anne? We really don't need the cut tree to be there. The next roadblock preventing the player from exploring the region are the gateway buildings accompanied by guards. However, they won't let you pass because they're thirsty. You mean to tell me that you won't let me go into Saffron City because you're thirsty?
You what?
Once again, can we please get this man a Pedialyte and a ride home? Madness. You have to go to Celadon City and get some tea from an old lady in a hotel and then give it to one of the guards, and miraculously all 4 of them are no longer thirsty. Okay, whatever. These gateway buildings essentially prevent the player from accessing cities with gyms that are too high level for the player's current status. Thankfully, there are 2 underground pathways in Kanto that allow you to bypass these buildings to progress, but as a result, you have to backtrack from Vermilion back up to essentially Cerulean and then travel all the way through the Rock Tunnel and then south to Lavender Town to progress through the game. Even then, once you get to Lavender Town, if you follow the southern route, you'll hit another roadblock being a Snorlax that fell asleep on the bridge and you can't move forward until you've obtained the Sylph Scope and the Poke-Flute, which requires further progression in the game to obtain. But honestly, I don't mind the Snorlax on Route 12 and Route 16. It kind of makes sense. Giant Pokemon falls asleep in the road and you can't get around? I get it. The interesting thing about the traversability of Kanto is that once you do deliver the tea to the guard in the gateway building, the entire region opens up to the player and you can then explore Kanto to your heart's content. The game even gives the player the autonomy to choose the order in which they tackle the gyms from that point on. Nice, I like it. Now, let's talk about transportation. Obviously, your Pokemon can transport you across the region via HMs and so on, and once you obtain Fly, you basically have access to fast travel, though you'll need to progress through the game quite a bit before that. Once you've obtained your running shoes and your Bugatti bicycle, you're able to travel much faster throughout the region as well. But there are also other forms of transport, being the Sea Gallop ferries in Vermilion City, which take you to the Sevi Islands, and the Magnet train in Saffron City, which will take you to Goldenrod and Johto, depending on the games you're playing. These forms of transportation not only open up new areas to explore, but also make for easy travel between regions. For traversability and transportation, I'm giving Kanto a score of 3. The good aspects would be the autonomy the player gains after dealing with the guards at the gateway buildings, the removal of HMs in the Let's Go games, and the ferries and trains that take you to other regions or areas. The downside is all the backtracking the player will have to do in order to progress through the storyline due to the numerous roadblocks, some of which make literally no sense. So yeah, it isn't horrible or anything, but it could definitely be better. I think 3, basically the score of being meh, is fairly accurate here. Okay, moving on to the next category. Exploratory Incentives. Does the region in question give you any reason to explore it outside of the standard bounds of the storyline? Every region has some hidden items, some TMs, and at times HMs, and goodies sprinkled throughout the region that incentivizes the player to explore a little bit. Maybe revisit a route or cave to retrieve an item you couldn't previously access, find nifty Easter eggs, obtain little quests, and hunt for rare or even legendary Pokemon. But what else is there to do? Well, in Celadon City, there's the game corner where you can get some valuable TMs and rare Pokemon. There's a condominium that has a secret back entry, and if you follow the stairs up to the top, there's a room there with a Pokeball containing an Eevee that you can snatch up for yourself. You can visit the Pewter Museum of Science and use Cut to access the side building where a researcher will give you an old amber, which you can restore at Cinnabar Island to obtain an Aerodactyl. You can also visit the Fighting Dojo in Saffron City, catch some rare Pokemon at the Safari Zone, Pal Park, or Go Park in Fuchsia, maybe hunt for an old man's gold teeth and whatnot. And in Pokemon Yellow, there are a few people in various areas that require you to complete a quest in exchange for the 3 starters, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, that are not available at the start of the game like the other titles. But the more interesting and off-the-beaten-path places to explore would be the Power Plant, Victory Road, and the Seafoam Islands, where you can find the legendary Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno, respectively. Nobody forces you to find these legendaries in the games. If you wish to catch them, you're gonna have to explore the region on your own volition. There's also a mysterious Pokemon mansion on Cinnabar Island, and this place used to be the home of a researcher but has since burned down and now stands abandoned. However, if you really explore the mansion well, you'll find little research papers that provide some lore about an incredibly strong legendary Pokemon. This legendary Pokemon would happen to be a Mewtwo, and can only be found in the Cerulean Cave, accessible only after you have a litany of HMs or special abilities on your Pikachu or Eevee. Once again, nobody in the game incentivizes you to find and catch it. You'll have to explore and figure that out on your own. But dang, the reward sure is hefty, isn't it? In Gen 3, once you've obtained the National Dex, one of the legendary beasts will begin to roam the region, giving you another incentive to explore a little bit. You can also visit the Sevi Islands in Gen 3, but I won't be talking about them since they aren't part of Kanto itself. However, accessing them is still an exploratory incentive that Kanto offers. The oddest thing about Kanto is that a lot of the content is removed in Gens 2 and 4, with closures of significant buildings all over the region. Remember earlier in the video when I discussed that the Pokemon Tower was converted into a radio tower in those gens? Yeah, you can't even explore the place. You can only visit the base level. But to give credit where credit is due, in the games that feature Kanto as the main region, this really isn't an issue. With the litany of things to do and places to explore, I think that Kanto over the years has added a lot of content to the region and currently offers tons of incentives to step off the beaten path and experience something exciting. And for those reasons, I'm giving Kanto's exploratory incentives a score of 4. The only reason it gets a 4 instead of a 5 is because of the competition it has with newer games in other regions. Kanto is not perfect as far as exploration is concerned, but it's pretty freaking great and has slowly earned its merits in this category. Okay, moving along. Culture, lore, and immersion. Do the people in this region talk about the state of the world? What about the city they love? Or do they just scream into the void about the importance of repels and to stock up on Pokeballs? Obviously, every game has NPCs like this, but still, how immersive and lore-drenched is the region? What's the culture like? In this category, I won't be detailing every single aspect of the lore of Kanto. You'll need to play the games for that, but I will give a brief overview. Essentially, we all know the player's story, right? Collect all 8 gym badges, take on the Elite Four, and become champion. This is nothing new. I want to talk about the lore of the region, not just the storyline, though the storyline might add some lore. Kanto is a place of booming technology. There are many different science labs all over the region which perform different functions. The Master Ball and Silph Scope were invented by Kanto's very own Silph Co. There's a massive power plant on the eastern side of the region. Many Pokemon can be revived from fossilization with the aid of technology, and some species of Pokemon were literally created by researchers in Kanto, like Porygon and the famous Mewtwo. But the region is also rife with crime, and it bleeds into the culture of society here, as Team Rocket, a large criminal organization, wishes to bank on illegal profits made from stolen Pokemon. Giovanni, their leader, has worked his way up to a significant position of power in the region. He's even part of the Pokemon League as Viridian City's gym leader. He runs the criminal headquarters of Team Rocket underneath Celadon City's Game Corner and has dedicated his life to the study of Pokemon. Team Rocket is always up to some dastardly stuff like kidnapping Mr. Fuji and occupying the Pokemon Tower, taking over Silph Co and harassing the president of the company in order to obtain the Master Ball, and robbing and ransacking people's homes and stealing their Pokemon and whatnot. There's even some implications that many of the scientists and researchers of Silph Co defected to Team Rocket and aided in the takeover of the company, along with some potential corruption between Giovanni and Silph Co's president in the Let's Go games based on their interactions. Yeah, there's some shenanigans going on here, I think. And people all over Kanto, in various towns and cities, will discuss with you at length of the trials and tribulations they've experienced at Team Rocket's behest. The people in Saffron City are held up in their homes in fear of what might happen to them due to the occupation of Team Rocket throughout the city. Biker gangs rule supreme in some routes. Gamblers hassle you for a few Pokedollars to blow at the game corner. Scientists are out here reviving dinosaurs, and they create a savage man-made experiment that threatens the safety of the region with its incredible power. People are scared in Kanto, and it's very evident that these sorts of things aren't uncommon here. You can find other bits of lore all over the region in places like the Pokemon Mansion, and if you read all of the research papers found there, you can uncover bits of information about Mew and the creation of Mewtwo, and how the researchers couldn't control the Pokemon's vicious tendencies, with some seriously dire implications. All in all, Kanto has a rich culture of modern technology, and the fabric of this culture is steeped in criminal activity and the struggles that the people of this region face. Due to these factors, I'm giving Kanto's culture, lore, and immersion category a score of 4. The sole factor preventing it from receiving a perfect score of 5 is that I feel certain elements of the lore lack depth and warrant further elaboration within the games themselves. However, apart from this, as you delve further into the region, you gain a profound understanding of the sentiments held by the inhabitants of Kanto. And I truly believe that Kanto shines in this category. Alrighty, moving forward. Pokemon diversity. This category is a little wonky wonk, particularly in the case of Kanto, due to its inclusion of only the original 151 Pokemon introduced upon the franchise's inception. However, Kanto doesn't lose any points for this, and the same holds true for all the other regions. When discussing Pokemon diversity, I'm not addressing the potential to diversify the games through trading or the sheer number of different Pokemon present, though these aspects may influence scores in other regions. My focus is more on the capacity to encounter a variety of Pokemon within the region, considering the species available there. Capiche? Finally, I'm not going to be covering the Pokemon found in the region where the region is not the main area of the game. For example, I won't be talking about the Kanto Pokemon diversity from the HeartGold and SoulSilver perspective, only the Red, Blue, Yellow, FireRed, LeafGreen, and Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee games. I will also not be differentiating between version exclusives, because in my mind, if you can find Bellsprout and Oddish in the same route, but they're only available in a specific version, they're still Kanto Pokemon found on that route regardless. Okay, let's get into it. Every Pokemon game is notorious for having a lack of Pokemon diversity in the beginning of the game. The routes closest to the player's hometown or starting point tend to only contain a few Pokemon that consist of the regional bird, the regional rodent, bug Pokemon, and maybe a few unique mons sprinkled in a little bit. This is certainly evident with Kanto. Let's start with the Pokemon found in the tall grass. I won't be covering every Pokemon found on every route in the region, as that would be ridiculous, but I will be talking about them generally. The Let's Go games definitely changed the Pokemon diversity quite a bit, and I'll be covering them separately here. Essentially, you're gonna be seeing a lot of Pidgey, Rattata, Caterpie, and Weedle in the early routes of Kanto. Before the mid-game, you might encounter some Spearow, Mankey, Nidoran male and female, Sandshrew, Ekans, Oddish, and Bellsprout. There are some other notable Pokemon dotted around the region early on in a playthrough, like Jigglypuff, Clefairy, Drowsy, and Meowth. But a lot of the game has repeat Pokemon in its routes, the most notable of which are Pidgey, Spearow, Rattata, Sandshrew, Ekans, Oddish, and Bellsprout. These Pokemon and their evolutionary lines are so common in Kanto, it is maddening. You'll even see these same pre-evolutions in the late game, including the Safari Zone. It's crazy to me to see the same handful of Pokemon everywhere you go in the region. Sure, there are a few interesting mons like Growlithe, Vulpix, Doduo, Abra, Venonat, and Voltorb available every once in a while, but otherwise the encounter diversity is very limited here. Even when you get to Victory Road, we're still back to the same common evolutionary lines repeated once again. Why? Would it have been so bad to have Ponyta on some of these routes? Or Coughing and Grimer? How about Psyduck, Slowpoke, or Cubone? There are some Kanto Pokemon that you cannot encounter in Kanto at all, like Eevee, Farfetch'd, Mr. Mime, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, or Porygon. These Pokemon are only found as in-game trades on the top floor of random apartment buildings, as gifts, or as prizes in the Celadon Game Corner. I understand why it was done this way. I just disagree with it. Kanto has a severe issue with having repeat encounters on every route and with Pokemon diversity in general. Let's talk about the caves now. There's a little bit of Pokemon diversity here. Although Zubat's evolutionary line can be found in just about every cave, there's at least some interesting Pokemon like Clefairy, Diglett, Seal, and Machop that are exclusive to their caves outside of the Cerulean cave. But why can't they be found occasionally on the routes? Right, because Seal is such an OP Pokemon that it's reserved for almost the end of the game. Thankfully, places like the Power Plant, Pokemon Tower, the Pokemon Mansion, and the Safari Zone give you some additional Pokemon diversity because these routes aren't cutting it at all. Finally, let's talk about water encounters. This is probably the most egregious example of poor Pokemon diversity. And while this may be the case in most Pokemon games, it's especially evident in Kanto. Everyone knows that the old rods in the games only allow you to catch 2, maybe in some cases 3 different Pokemon, and one of those is almost guaranteed to be a Magikarp. That's fine, but you can't even get the good rod or the super rod until almost the end of the game. So Pokemon like Goldeen, Poliwag, and Horsea won't be obtainable until you get to Fuchsia City. Hell, you could probably get the Super Rod before then, but you'd still have to do a hell of a lot of battling with Team Rocket and overcoming Kanto's roadblocks before being able to access these items, and these fairly mediocre Pokemon to boot. Madness. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee definitely improved the Pokemon diversity for Kanto, as you can find Bulbasaur in the Viridian Forest, Charmander on routes 3 and 4, Squirtle on routes 24 and 25, and you can also find Pokemon like Psyduck, Meowth, and Onix much earlier than you could in older games, along with other stronger Pokemon. Thankfully, the Let's Go games solved the issue of Pokemon diversity in Kanto, and there is a very large variety of Pokemon that you can find across the region now. Even the Pokemon that couldn't be previously found in the wild are now roaming around the routes in these games. The Pokemon diversity score for Kanto stands at a firm 3. Largely due to the influence of the Let's Go games. Historically, Kanto has suffered from notably poor and limited Pokemon diversity, and only very recently has this aspect received any improvement. Therefore, I just can't justify giving Kanto a score of higher than 3 in this category, and that's thanks solely to the Let's Go games preventing it from receiving a score as low as 1 in this category. Okay, rant over. Let's move on to the next category. Gym Leaders, Elite Four, and Trainer Classes. The question here is, do the Trainer Classes, Gym Leaders, and Elite Four make sense for the region? Let's start with the Gym Leaders. Just to state the obvious real quick, Gym Leaders and the Elite Four members for that matter are essentially Pokemon type specialists with teams of Pokemon that share the same typing. First you've got Brock, the first you'll encounter in the games and leader of the Pewter City Gym. Brock is a rock-type enthusiast, which fits really well into Pewter City, described as being nestled between rugged mountains and rocks. The mountainous area around it and the fact that it lies so close to Mount Moon makes perfect sense as to why a rock-type gym would exist here. The pewter-colored aesthetic also meshes well with this concept. Next, we've got Misty, the water-type specialist of the Cerulean City Gym. She fits really well into the mix as Cerulean City is surrounded by water. Not only that, but the cerulean roofs of the city match the water-type concept. Fortunately, Kanto is fairly consistent in this aspect. The color of the city is similar to the colors associated with the name of the city, and even with some of the gym leaders found there. Pewter for rock, Cerulean for water, Celadon for grass, Cinnabar for fire, and so on. I like this pattern of semi-consistency. And I say semi-consistency because we're about to break that pattern. Following Misty, we've got Lieutenant Surge, the electric-type gym leader stationed in Vermilion City. Lieutenant Surge's backstory as an American soldier whose life was saved by electric-type Pokemon raises some questions about his connection to a coastal city like Vermilion. I mean, one possibility could be the presence of a harbor in Vermilion, which might explain how he arrived there. And Lieutenant Surge also has a history of being a pilot, although he specifically served in the army. So once again, I'm not sure how this connects to Vermilion. Personally, I think he might have been a better fit for Saffron City, given its status as a bustling metropolis with extensive corporations and a significant reliance on electricity to power the city. Not to mention the yellow/gold color of Saffron would have fit the electric type better than the orange hue of Vermilion. Moving on to Erica, the grass-type gym leader located in Celadon City. There are plenty of trees, bushes, and other greenery around the southern part of the city, so she's a good fit here. Next up, we've got Koga, the poison-type gym leader of Fuchsia City. I'm wondering why poison was chosen as the gym type for this city. You've got a zoo and the safari zone here, so I'm not really seeing a connection between these two concepts. Personally, if the gym were moved to Lavender Town, this would make more sense. And although Lavender Town is more associated with ghost types, the only ghost types found there are also poison types, so it could have been a better fit for Koga and his Pokemon. Following Koga, we have Sabrina, my twin, the psychic type gym leader and my favorite gym leader, situated in Saffron City. The color of saffron is more yellow, and that's got really nothing to do with the colors that one would associate with the psychic type. Personally, I think Sabrina would do better in a place like Fuchsia. She wouldn't have any real conceptual connection to the place, but at least the colors would more closely align. Next up, we've got Cinnabar Island's very own fire-type gym leader, Blaine. Because this island also doubles as a volcano, I think he fits here perfectly. This one makes perfect sense, and Blaine really wouldn't be a better fit for any other place in the region. Finally, we've got Giovanni, the ground-type gym leader of Viridian City, though he ain't even there most of the time. I don't see any connection as to why Giovanni would belong in this tiny town surrounded by trees. Maybe it makes for good cover, but he's a ground-type specialist. And I think he would be more suited to someplace like Vermilion City, located near Diglett's Cave, plus there's a harbor in Vermilion where he could theoretically ship out more of his stolen Pokemon to make bigger profits. And the colors of Viridian City don't really match here, as Vermilion would have been a little closer to the ground-type color scheme. As far as the gym leaders' typings are concerned, they all work great with Kanto. Koga especially, considering the sheer amount of poison types in the region. Everyone seems to be a great fit to represent the best of Kanto, and I don't really see any issue with them, except that some of them would be better suited to different cities than the ones they currently reside in. Next, let's talk about the Elite Four. Lorelei and Bruno fit here pretty well as they're good representatives for the biome and Pokemon type diversity found around the region. Though Agatha shouldn't be an Elite Four member. She doesn't even know what her type specialty is. She's said to be a ghost type specialist, but she only has 3 ghosts on her team. But her entire team is comprised of poison types. So she's not a ghost type specialist, she's a poison type specialist, which we already have with Koga. Let them switch spots. Why can't Koga be an Elite Four member in Kanto and in Johto? And Agatha can just be a ghost type gym leader and build a gym in Lavender Town. She doesn't belong in the Elite Four, if you ask me. Finally, we've got Lance, the dragon type enthusiast. And only 3 of his 5 team members are actually dragon-type Pokemon, and 1 of them is a repeat. I would say Lance is more of a flying-type specialist. And as Michael from MNJTV would say, he shall be known as Birdkeeper Lance. If you don't even know what your type specialty is, you shouldn't be an Elite Four member. He can go back to being an ace trainer in Victory Road, or just a regular flying-type gym leader somewhere. I don't dislike Lance. I just dislike that they made him an Elite Four member in this way. I think Sabrina would have been a better fit, but I'm biased, so. Okay, moving on to the trainer classes. Most of the trainer classes should make sense in a region. They're essentially the types of people that make up the region, and their specialties should match the biome diversity of the region. You've obviously got your lads and your lasses and your beauties and your hikers and so on, but all of those are clearly going to fit the region just fine. I will only be mentioning the ones that either fit the region exceptionally well or those that don't belong here at all. First things first, I think the biker trainer class is great for Kanto, what with Route 17 being a bike route and the criminal aspect of the region, as these guys seem to be part of a biker gang. Next, we've got the burglar trainer class, and it too fits really well with the criminal goings-on in Kanto, though I'm not really sure why the cue ball or roughneck trainer classes need to be differentiated from the biker class. Only they don't have a bike, but they still seem to be part of the same gang as they wear the same clothes. Redundant trainer classes here, if you ask me. The Gambler Trainer class is so interesting. In Gens 1 and 2, they were called Gamblers. This makes sense, as gambling is a thing in Kanto, what with the Game Corner and all. However, it was changed to the Gamer class in Gen 3, and while the sprite looks the same, the name is so goofy. It's not what we would refer to gamers in the real world, but whatever, it's fine. Even more interesting is that it was changed again to the PI trainer class in Gen 4, and I have no idea why. Gamblers and private investigators aren't particularly similar, so that's odd, but not super relevant to Kanto. The Gambler class fits perfectly though. The Rocker trainer class is so odd. Firstly, in Gen 1, they're holding what I can only imagine to be whips, though Bulbapedia refers to them as electrical cords. Okay. And why the Rocker class if they have nothing to do with music? Kanto isn't even a particularly musical region anyway. I don't know, it doesn't really belong here. Trainer classes that represent the electric type best would be the Engineers and Super Nerds, although Super Nerds also dabble in poison types. These trainer classes fit in really well with Kanto's modern, technological, and urban characteristics, aligning with the region's overall theme. Additionally, the Scientist trainer class also complements this thematic synergy with inorganic teams of Pokemon including Magnemite, Voltorb, and Porygon. Kanto's gym leaders, Elite Four, and trainer classes get a score of 4, though it kinda could easily been 3, but I'm giving it a 4. They're overall pretty good. The vast majority of the trainer classes fit the region perfectly, with some great standouts and very few duds. However, the Elite Four needs some serious improvement with regards to the Poison-type specialist Agatha and Bird Keeper Lance. I'd also like to see Lieutenant Surge, Koga, Sabrina, and Giovanni be moved elsewhere in the region, but nobody stands out as a poor fit for Kanto itself. Therefore, I think Kanto deserves a 4 in this category, though Agatha and Lance could have brought it down to a 3. I still think it deserves a 4. Okay, next category. Naturally occurring phenomena. So, naturally occurring phenomena refers to the processes that would occur in nature, like weather, a day-night cycle, seasons, and established days of the week. This category is fairly easy to score because the games where the regions can be found either have them or they don't. It will be very difficult for any region to score perfectly in this area unless every single one of these mechanics is included in the games and serve a purpose. Plus, weather has to exist in the overworld. Pokemon moves that create weather in battle don't count. And sure, we could assume that every region operates with established time measurements, seasons, and weather, we just may not experience them in the games. But you know what? To me, if you don't actually experience them while you are in the region, then the region doesn't get points for it. Period. End of story. Now, there's only one region where you really experience seasons properly, but if a game has aspects to it that at least make you feel like you're experiencing a season, it'll get points to reflect that. Most regions will likely not do well in this area because Game Freak didn't put all forms of naturally occurring phenomena in all of the games. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that the game is bad, but it does factor into the overall enjoyability of the region to me. So let's talk about it. Kanto is an odd bird because it exists in different iterations between the games. In Gens 1, 3, and 9, there is no day and night cycle, no days of the week, no seasons or even seasonal areas, and no overworld weather. However, in Gens 2 and 4, where Kanto also exists, there is a day and night cycle and days of the week. I can't discount this, as you can experience Kanto with these mechanics, even though it doesn't occur in the games where Kanto is the main region. So, for naturally occurring phenomena, Kanto gets a score of 2. Okay, let's move on to the final category of this review: music and ambiance. One of the most memorable aspects of a region is the music that plays in the cities, towns, routes, caves, and other explorable areas. Music can really change the way we feel about a game and make it just that much more immersive and incredible. For the purposes of this review, ambiance refers to the feel of the area. Can you hear little water droplets in the caves? What about Pokemon cries faintly in the background, giving you hints of what types of Pokemon can be found there, or possibly even the sound of a door creaking in a spooky house? Ambiance provides atmosphere and adds to the immersion of a game. Let's talk about Kanto's music. Absolutely iconic. The strings, the winds, the piano, and even the MIDI sounds are all evident throughout the songs of Kanto. Most people are familiar with Kanto's epic and bombastic battle ballads and route themes. Yet there's also a quaint and classical feel to the songs played in towns like Cerulean and Vermilion City, and in the very memorable early routes. Not to mention the daunting and cautious feel of the tunes rolling throughout the Viridian Forest or the Team Rocket hideout. And how could we forget the solemn and spooky sounds of Lavender Town and the Pokemon Tower? Want to really feel and hear the technological and modern themes that the developers of Kanto were striving to achieve? Hop into the Pokemon Mansion or the Power Plant. You'll catch the vibe. Each of them is memorable, if only for nostalgia's sake, but damn, you could really get these tunes stuck in your head. We could probably all hum the melodies to these classic and timeless songs. Though a few of them are pretty similar, they truly bring about feelings of progression, excitement, joy, fear, and triumph. Occasionally, you can hear some ambient Pokemon cries in the background of Kanto, but other than that, unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of ambiance here. Even in the Let's Go games, you can't even hear your character's footsteps, which is something that was present in HeartGold and SoulSilver. So it kinda gains a point and then loses one. And for these factors, I'm giving Kanto's music and ambiance a score of 4. A small amount of environmental ambiance in the background really could have taken this category up a notch for Kanto. Kanto's music is very iconic, particularly memorable, and enjoyable little earworms that stick with you throughout the years. And that's it for the overview of Kanto. Quite a mouthful, huh? There's a lot to cover when talking about the Pokemon regions. See what I mean about the fact that there's a lot of thought, planning, and love that goes into them? Anyway, after tallying up the scores for the different categories of this review, Kanto comes out with a score of 3.3. Though I'm gonna have to round it down to just a score of 3 and deduct that extra third of a point because so many features of Kanto were removed in different iterations of the games, like the Pokemon Tower in Gens 2 and 4 and the Game Corner in Gen 9. Unfortunately, you just can't experience all that Kanto has to offer, even in the games where Kanto is the main region. Sorry, but Kanto's actual final score is gonna have to be 3. I feel like the outcome of the score for Kanto is pretty fitting. The layout and geography are pretty basic and simple, and there is very little biome diversity here. However, the cities and towns are well designed with clear and obvious themes and concepts consistent across the region. The routes and caves are pretty freaking bland, with the routes in particular having very little Pokemon diversity, with many common Pokemon repeated on a multitude of routes. There are so many caves in Kanto that require passage that it feels like as soon as you leave one cave, you gotta enter another, and it can leave you with feelings of cave fatigue. The region is fairly difficult to traverse at first, with tons of roadblocks, backtracking, and unnecessary HM usage. However, this clears up pretty quickly once one of the roadblocks is removed and the entirety of Kanto opens up for you to freely explore. And speaking of which, there are tons of exploratory incentives around Kanto. From discovering the elusive research papers in the burned down Pokemon Mansion to the Sevi Islands, and from the optional power plant to Cerulean Cave, there's a lot to discover in Kanto and tons to do on your own terms. So take a moment, look around a little bit, and you might find something exciting and unexpected. In addition, there is a bit of lore to Kanto that may be difficult to discover, as a sizable chunk of it is covered very sparsely and in a shallow manner. However, if you do pay close attention, read between the lines, speak to the people of the region, and piece things together, you'll find that the lore here is pretty interesting. The culture of Kanto is modern and technological, and I feel that the games do a pretty decent job of making these themes evident. All of the gym leaders fit right into place here in Kanto, although some of the Elite Four members should be fired, retired, or demoted. The trainer classes help to provide a bit of immersion by reflecting the culture of Kanto in that it is steeped in crime and people are nervous in this region, scared of what might happen to them due to the criminal overlords that reside here. Due to these trainer classes, you really get the sense that scientific progress is very important here. And while you may not get to experience rainy days or the seasonal changing of the leaves in Kanto, you're still left with a feeling of excitement and joy from the absolutely iconic and powerful soundtrack of the region. All in all, Kanto is fairly enjoyable, nostalgic, and memorable, but it certainly isn't without its flaws. Some people find these flaws endearing, and others who are new to the franchise may find them redundant. Either way, Kanto simply is not perfect by any means, but it sure is a delightful experience nonetheless. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this Kanto review. What did you think about this review? How would you score Kanto? Leave me your comments down below. I'm really excited to read y'all's opinions. And just as a heads up, these region reviews are extremely extensive and require a ton of work to create, so I won't be able to release these as often as I'd like to. However, I certainly enjoy making them and had a lot of fun talking about Kanto, and I hope y'all enjoyed it too. And if you did, please like the video. A lot of hard work went into it, and if you noticed that and got some enjoyment or entertainment out of it, it would really mean a lot to me if you just hit that like button. And subscribe to see more content like this from me. Don't forget to hit that bell icon too so you can get notified when I upload a new video. It'll be a little random, so you know, clickety-clack on that bell icon and whatnot. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!